The smell of fresh soil always reminded Ruth Adami of her grandmother's garden back on Earth. She wiped grease from her hands and watched her children chase each other between the rows of growing wheat. Deo, 11 years old and full of energy, pretended to be a spaceship while his younger sister Amara followed quietly behind him. Haven's Rest was a good place to raise children. 3,000 colonists lived on this small moon, far from the wars and politics of the inner systems. Ruth had chosen this life deliberately. After 12 years as a colonial marine, she wanted peace. She wanted her children to know something other than conflict. The harvester behind her hummed back to life, another successful repair. Ruth smiled and called out to her children. Breakfast would be ready soon at the community hall. Then the sky turned wrong. Ruth looked up and felt her stomach drop. Ships were descending through the atmosphere, not human ships. The designs were angular and cruel, built for function rather than beauty. She counted 7 of them before her training took over and she stopped counting. She ran. Deo saw her coming and his smile disappeared. He had never seen that expression on his mother's face before. Ruth grabbed both children without slowing down and pulled them toward the maintenance tunnels beneath the colony. Behind them, the first energy blast struck the ground. People were screaming now. Ruth did not look back. She knew what was happening. She had read the intelligence reports years ago, back when such things were her business. The Vreth, insectoid slavers from the Orion Spur. They took humans for labor in their mining operations. To them, her species was nothing more than livestock. The entrance to the maintenance tunnels was hidden behind the water treatment building. Ruth had memorized every escape route in the colony within her first week of arrival. Old habits never truly died. She pushed her children through the hatch and followed them into darkness. Above them, the sounds of chaos continued. Energy weapons, explosions, the clicking speech of aliens. Then, slowly, the screaming stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Ruth held her children close in the darkness. Amara was crying softly. Deo was trying very hard not to. They stayed hidden for hours. Ruth listened to the sounds above, heavy footsteps that did not belong to humans, clicking communication, the dragging of bodies. When she finally moved, she moved with purpose. These tunnels connected the entire colony's infrastructure. She knew them well. Her job as chief mechanic had required her to crawl through them dozens of times. She found what she was looking for in a storage alcove near the old reactor station. Pre-war equipment, emergency supplies that had been forgotten when the colony shifted to agricultural focus. Weapons, ammunition, medical supplies. Ruth's hands remembered the weight of a rifle before her mind caught up. She checked the charge, tested the sight, and felt something cold settle into her chest. Dr. Okonkwo found them on the second day. The colony physician had survived by hiding in his medical bunker. He was shaking and pale, but alive. Ruth did not comfort him. She simply told him to follow and keep the children safe. On the third day, Ruth left the tunnels for the first time. She found a Vreth patrol, 2 of them. They were searching a destroyed building, their insected bodies clicking and twitching as they communicated. They had not expected resistance. Their weapons were holstered. Ruth killed them both in 4 seconds. The first shot took the larger one through what passed for its head. The second one turned, surprised, and died before it could raise its weapon. She stood over their bodies and felt nothing. When she returned to the tunnels, Deo was awake. He saw the blood on her clothes. He saw the look in her eyes. He did not recognize his mother in that moment. Ruth knelt before him and spoke softly. She told him that she would keep him safe. She told him that she would keep Amara safe. She told him that nothing in this universe would stop her from protecting them. Then she kissed his forehead and went back to studying the Vreth communication device she had taken from the bodies. The slave ship would arrive in 6 days. 6 days until the captured colonists would be transported off-world forever. 6 days until rescue might arrive if the distress signal had reached human space. Ruth had 6 days to keep her children alive. In the darkness of the tunnels, surrounded by the enemy, armed with aging weapons and fueled by something far older than technology, Ruth Adami began to plan. Somewhere above, Brood Commander Skethise received reports of 2 dead hunters. He dismissed the concern. Survivors with weapons were common in the early days of harvesting operations. They always died. Eventually, he did not understand what he was dealing with. He had unleashed something that his species had no framework to comprehend. Not a soldier defending territory, not a warrior seeking glory, something far more ancient and far more dangerous. A mother whose children were in danger. And she was just getting started. Femi was 16 years old and wanted to die fighting. Ruth found him hiding in a collapsed storage unit, clutching a broken pipe like a weapon. His entire family had been taken in the first wave. His eyes were empty in a way that Ruth recognized from her years of service. She did not offer sympathy. She simply told him to follow or stay and die alone. He followed. Their group now numbered 5. Ruth, her 2 children, Dr. Okonkwo and Femi. They moved through the maintenance tunnels like ghosts, staying ahead of the Vreth patrols that swept through the underground passages. Ruth had been studying the enemy for 3 days now. She understood their patterns. They searched in pairs, communicated through clicking sounds and radio signals, and returned to their base every 6 hours to report. They were methodical and efficient. They were also completely unprepared for what she was doing to them. By the 4th day, Ruth had killed 9 Vreth. She struck without warning, disappeared before reinforcements arrived, and left no survivors to report her tactics. The aliens were becoming nervous. Their patrols moved faster, checked corners more carefully, and stayed closer together. It did not help them. Brood Commander Skethise stood over the bodies of his latest dead hunters and felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. The Vreth did not experience fear the way humans did, but something close to it. Confusion, perhaps, uncertainty. His hunters were among the best in the fleet. They had harvested 17 worlds without significant losses. Now they were dying in dark tunnels, killed by something they could not see or track. Subcommander Vrethic approached carefully. He was younger than Skethise, more cautious by nature. He carried a data tablet. The subcommander had been researching. He had accessed old intelligence files from previous operations involving humans. Most were routine, successful harvests with minimal resistance, but some were different. Some were marked with warnings. Vrethic showed his commander the files. They spoke of something the Vreth called the maternal response, a documented phenomenon observed in human females when their offspring were threatened. The files described subjects who ignored pain, ignored exhaustion, and fought with a ferocity that exceeded all combat predictions. Skethise dismissed the reports. Superstition created by failed commanders looking for excuses. He ordered larger hunting parties and continued the sweeps. In the tunnels below, Ruth prepared for her next mission. Dr. Okonkwo watched her check her weapons. His hands were steady now. The fear had been replaced by something else, purpose, perhaps, or simply acceptance. He asked her how she could do it, how she could kill so easily and then return to hold her children. Ruth did not answer immediately. She finished her preparations and looked at him with eyes that held no uncertainty. She told him that there was no separation between the two things. She killed because she held her children. Every Vreth she put down was one less threat to Deo and Amara. The love and the violence came from the same place inside her. That night, Ruth conducted her most ambitious operation yet. She infiltrated the Vreth supply depot and destroyed their medical equipment. Without it, their wounded could not be treated. Every injury would now be permanent. She killed 4 more guards on her way out. Skethise received the report and finally understood that this was not normal resistance. Someone was waging a systematic campaign against his forces. Someone with training, intelligence, and absolutely no intention of stopping. He committed half his hunters to finding this single enemy. He wanted them alive. He wanted to understand what he was fighting. Ruth watched the increased patrols from her hiding spot and smiled. The more hunters searching for her, the fewer guards protecting the captive colonists. The alien commander was making exactly the mistake she wanted him to make. Femi asked her what the plan was. She told him simply, survive until rescue arrived. Make the enemy bleed for every hour they stayed on this moon. And when the time was right, free the captured colonists. The teenager looked at her with something like hope in his eyes. It was the first time he had felt that emotion since the invasion began. In the darkness of the tunnels, Ruth counted her remaining ammunition and calculated her next moves. 15 Vreth dead, dozens more to go, 6 days had become 4. She thought of her children sleeping nearby, watched over by Dr. Okonkwo. She thought of the 200 colonists held in Vreth cages above. She thought of her late husband, who had always said she was the strongest person he knew. He had no idea. Ruth Ademi was not fighting a war. Wars had rules, objectives, and endings. What she was doing was something more basic, more primal. She was a mother protecting her young, and she would not stop until her children were safe or she was dead. There was no third option. The Vreth would learn this lesson. They would learn it in blood. 23 Vreth lay dead across Haven's Rest by the 5th day. Their bodies marked a trail of violence that spread from the maintenance tunnels to the outer edges of the colony. Hunting parties refused assignments. Guards abandoned posts. Fear had found its way into creatures that were never meant to feel it. Ruth had not slept more than 2 hours at a time since the invasion began. Her body ran on something beyond simple adrenaline. Every time exhaustion threatened to take her, she looked at her children and found more strength. Dr. Okonkwo dressed a wound on her arm while she cleaned her rifle. A lucky shot from a Vreth guard had grazed her during the previous night's raid. She had killed the guard and 3 others before retreating to the tunnels. The doctor asked if she felt pain. Ruth told him that pain was just information. Her body was telling her something was wrong. She acknowledged the information and continued functioning. He did not ask any more questions. Amara had barely spoken since the invasion. The 7-year-old watched her mother with wide eyes, processing things no child should have to understand. When Ruth returned from her missions, covered in alien blood and smelling of smoke, Amara would simply hold her hand and say nothing. That night, Amara spoke. She asked her mother a question that cut through all the violence and strategy and survival. She asked if her mother was a monster. Ruth knelt before her daughter and took her small hands. She looked into those innocent eyes and told the truth. Only for you, she said, only ever for you. Amara seemed to accept this answer. She hugged her mother tightly and went back to sleep beside her brother. Ruth sat in the darkness for a long time after that, thinking about what she had become and what she would become before this was over. Brood Commander Skethise was losing control of his operation. His hunters were demoralized, his equipment was sabotaged, his communications were being monitored, and somewhere in the darkness, a single human was systematically destroying everything he had built. Subcommander Vrethik brought more files, more warnings. He had found records from a failed harvesting operation 12 years ago, a colony called New Brisbane. 140 Vreth dead, the operation abandoned, the cause listed as a single human female protecting 3 offspring. Skethise read the files this time. He read about a woman who had fought for 19 days without stopping, who had killed with weapons, with tools, with her bare hands, who had survived wounds that should have been fatal, who had only stopped when rescue forces arrived and her children were confirmed safe. The Vreth called it the maternal response. The humans had another name for it. They called it being a mother. Skethise did not understand the distinction. In his species, offspring were raised communally. No individual Vreth felt specific attachment to specific young. The concept of a parent willing to die, willing to kill without limit, for their biological children was alien to him in the truest sense. He underestimated it. That was his fatal mistake. Ruth discovered the location of the captive colonists on the 5th night. They were held in the colony's former community center, now converted into a processing facility. Guards rotated every 4 hours. Approximately 60 Vreth protected the building at any time. She could not fight 60 Vreth alone, but she did not need to. Ruth spent the night making contact with the captives. She found a maintenance shaft that led to within meters of the holding area. Through the walls, she could hear human voices, crying, prayers, whispered conversations. She knocked on the wall in a pattern, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, old Earth code for distress. Someone knocked back. Ruth had found Sergeant Yusuf, a former soldier who had retired to the colony 5 years ago. He was calm, organized, and ready to fight. Through the walls, they planned. The slave ship would arrive in 2 days. Once the colonists were loaded onto that ship, they would never be seen again. Whatever Ruth was going to do, she needed to do it before then. She returned to her children and held them while they slept. Deo stirred and asked if everything was okay. Ruth told him that everything would be okay. She told him that help was coming. She told him that she loved him and his sister more than anything in the universe. She did not tell him about the plan. She did not tell him that tomorrow she would attack the holding facility. She did not tell him that she might not come back. Some things a mother kept to herself. Dawn approached. Ruth checked her weapons one final time. She had enough ammunition for perhaps 30 Vreth. She would need to be creative with the rest. The hunt was about to become a war. 31 Vreth dead. Ruth counted them as she prepared for the assault on the holding facility. Each kill represented a threat removed from her children's world. Each body was a message to the invaders. You made a mistake coming here. Dr. Okonkwo would stay with the children. Femi wanted to fight, but Ruth told him his job was more important. If she did not return, he was to take Deo and Amara deeper into the tunnels and hide until rescue arrived. The teenager argued, but her eyes stopped him. There was no negotiation in that gaze. Ruth kissed her sleeping children and disappeared into the darkness. The colony's fuel reserves were stored in 3 large tanks near the agricultural sector. Ruth had spent hours studying the layout, calculating blast radiuses, and planning escape routes. The explosion would draw every Vreth guard away from the holding facility. It would also create chaos, and in chaos, people could escape. She set the charges carefully. Timer set for 15 minutes, enough time to reach the holding facility and coordinate with Sergeant Yusuf. The walk across the ruined colony felt longer than it should have. Ruth moved through shadows, avoiding patrols, counting guards. The Vreth were nervous. They knew something was coming. They just did not know what. She reached the holding facility with 3 minutes to spare. Through the maintenance shaft, she made contact with Yusuf. He had organized the captives. The strongest would rush the guards when the chaos began. The others would run. Ruth told him to head for the wilderness. She had marked safe routes on a map that she pushed through a crack in the wall. Follow the paths, stay hidden, wait for rescue. Yusuf asked about her. What was she going to do? Ruth did not answer. There was no time. The explosion lit up the night like a second sun. The fuel tanks detonated in sequence, sending pillars of fire into the sky. Every Vreth in the colony turned toward the blast. Ruth was already moving. She hit the holding facility from the maintenance shaft, emerging behind the remaining guards. Her rifle spoke 3 times. 3 guards fell. The captives surged forward, overwhelming the stunned Vreth with desperate strength. People ran, some toward the marked routes, some in random directions. Some did not make it, but many did. Hundreds of colonists scattered into the darkness while the sky burned behind them. Ruth did not run. She had one more task. Brood Commander Skethise arrived at the holding facility to find carnage. His guards dead. His captives escaped. And standing in the center of the chaos, covered in blood and firelit, was a human female. She was smaller than he expected. Average height, average build, nothing physically remarkable. But her eyes held something that made even his alien biology recognize danger. Skethise was larger than Ruth, stronger, better armed. He had killed dozens of species across 17 worlds. He did not fear a single human. He should have. The fight lasted 4 minutes. Ruth used everything, her rifle until it was empty, her knife until it broke, the environment around her, debris, fire, her own body as a weapon. Skethise landed blows that should have ended her. He broke 2 of her ribs. He tore open a wound on her leg. He threw her across the room twice. She kept getting up. In the final moments, Ruth was on top of him, her hands around what passed for his throat, squeezing with strength that came from somewhere beyond muscle and bone. He looked into her eyes and saw no hatred, no anger, just cold, absolute determination. She squeezed until he stopped moving. Ruth stood over the body of the brood commander, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Around her, the facility burned. In the distance, she could hear colonists escaping into the wilderness. She activated Skethise's communication device. The signal would reach the command ship in orbit. Fleet Admiral Keswick answered. Ruth spoke clearly despite the pain. She told him that his commander was dead. She told him that his operation had failed. She told him to leave this system and never return. Then she said the words that would echo through Vreth space for generations. "You should have left us alone." She destroyed the communicator and limped back toward the tunnels. Back toward her children. She had done what she set out to do. The colonists were scattered and hidden. The Vreth command structure was broken. Now she just had to survive until help arrived. Her body wanted to collapse. Her wounds screamed for attention. But somewhere in the darkness, Deo and Amara were waiting. Ruth kept walking. A mother's work was never done. Ships tore through the sky on the 6th day. Not Vreth ships, human warships, 12 of them dropping from faster-than-light travel directly into the atmosphere of Delphia 7. Governor Henriksen's distress signal had reached human space. The response was not diplomatic. It was not measured. The United Earth Navy had deployed a full battle group with orders to destroy the Vreth operation completely. Admiral Constance Nwasu commanded the fleet from the bridge of the UEN Retribution. She had seen the aftermath of Vreth raids before, colonies stripped of their populations, families torn apart, children shipped to mining operations where they worked until they died. She had no intention of allowing that to happen here. Fleet Admiral Keswick tried to flee. His command ship broke orbit and aimed for open space. He almost made it. The human warships were faster. They surrounded the Vreth vessel and disabled its engines with precision strikes. Boarding parties followed. Marines swept through the alien ship, capturing crew members and securing the bridge. Keswick surrendered. He would face a human tribunal for crimes against humanity. He would spend the rest of his life in a prison cell, wondering how a simple harvesting operation had gone so terribly wrong. On the surface, Marine dropships descended toward the scattered survivor camps. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka piloted the first ship to reach the main group. She expected to find frightened colonists hiding in the wilderness. She found that, but she also found something else. She found organization, purpose, people who had been ready to fight. And she found Ruth Ademi. Ruth stood at the perimeter of the survivor camp, rifle raised, children positioned behind her. She had not lowered her weapon in 6 days. Her body was covered in bandages. Her eyes were hollow with exhaustion, but her hands were steady. Tanaka approached slowly. She identified herself, called out that she was human, that rescue had arrived, that they were safe now. Ruth did not respond. Her rifle stayed aimed at the approaching figures. Her mind, pushed beyond normal limits, could not fully process that the danger had passed. It took Deo's voice to bring her back. The boy stepped past his mother and stood in front of her rifle. He told her it was okay. He told her they were safe. He told her she could stop now. Ruth blinked, the rifle lowered slowly, her legs buckled. Tanaka caught her before she hit the ground. The Marines secured the area quickly. Medical teams moved through the survivors, treating wounds and providing supplies. Shuttles began transporting people to the warships in orbit. Admiral Nwasu received reports from the surface. The colonists had survived against impossible odds. Most of them, anyway. Casualties were significant but far lower than expected. Then she received another report, one that made her request clarification twice. 47 Vreth dead. Confirmed kills attributed to a single combatant, a civilian colonist, a mechanic, a mother of 2 children. Nwasu asked to meet the soldier responsible. She was told it was not a soldier. Ruth woke in a medical shuttle, surrounded by equipment and soft lighting. Her children were beside her, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Dr. Okonkwo sat nearby, watching over all 3 of them. He told her what had happened, the fleet's arrival, the Vreth surrender, the rescue operations. He told her that she had done something remarkable. Ruth looked at her sleeping children and felt nothing remarkable. She had done what any mother would do. She had kept her children alive. The shuttle lifted off from Delphia 7 and climbed toward the waiting warship. Below, the colony burned in places, scarred by invasion and violence, but humans walked its surface again. Free humans. Ruth held her children's hands and finally allowed her eyes to close. Femi stood at a viewport on one of the rescue ships, watching the fleet form up for the journey home. He was thinking about his family, about the people he had lost, about the woman who had pulled him from the ruins and given him something to hold on to. He had asked her once how she kept fighting, how she found the strength to continue when everything seemed hopeless. Ruth had answered simply. She told him that giving up was not possible, not when her children needed her, not when surrender meant their death or enslavement. There was no choice to be made. There was only action. Femi did not fully understand then, but watching the warships around him, knowing that humanity had crossed the stars to rescue its people, he began to understand. Something larger. Humans did not abandon their own. And heaven help anyone who threatened their children. 3 months after the liberation of Delphia 7, representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations gathered in the Galactic Council chambers. The Vreth incident had become a matter of interstellar importance. Questions needed answers. Ambassador Kelvos, a neutral species representative, presented the official report. His species had no stake in the conflict. They simply recorded facts. The facts were difficult to believe. One human, a civilian with no active military status, armed with aging equipment and no external support, against a full Vreth hunting party of over 100 trained warriors. 47 confirmed kills, a command structure dismantled, an entire slaving operation destroyed, and at the center of it all, a woman who had stopped fighting only when her children were confirmed safe. The council demanded explanation. How was this possible? Human military forces were known to be capable, but this was beyond any reasonable prediction. What weapon had the humans deployed? The human representative stood. Her name was Ambassador Grace Oduya, and she had read the complete file on Ruth Ademi before attending this session. She understood the confusion. She told the council that no weapon had been deployed, no special training, no genetic modification. What happened on Delphia 7 was simply human nature expressing itself under extreme circumstances. The council did not understand. Ambassador Oduya explained. She described the biological and neurological changes that occurred in human parents when their offspring were threatened. The suppression of pain responses, the elimination of fear, the complete override of self-preservation instincts. She told them that humans called this response many things: love, devotion, instinct, but the result was always the same. A parent protecting their child would fight without limits. They would ignore wounds that should be fatal. They would continue acting long after their body should have failed. The Vreth had not faced a soldier on Delphia 7. They had faced something far more dangerous. They had faced a mother whose children were in danger, and there was no force in the galaxy that could stop such a creature. The council listened in silence. On Haven's Rest, the colony was being rebuilt. New structures rose from the ashes. New families arrived to fill the empty spaces. The moon would recover, it would thrive again. Ruth Adami watched her children play in the rebuilt colony square. Deo was teaching Amara some game involving rocks and lines in the dirt. They were laughing. The sound was the most beautiful thing Ruth had ever heard. She wore no medals. She accepted no titles. When journalists came asking for interviews, she turned them away. When military officials offered commissions, she declined. She had returned to repairing harvesters. It was good work, honest work, the kind of work that let her come home to her children each night. The colonists treated her differently now. They nodded with respect when she passed. They offered small kindnesses. They watched her with something like awe in their eyes, but they also gave her space. They understood that she did not want to be celebrated. She wanted to be left alone with her family. A young Vreth prisoner arrived at the colony that spring. He was being transported for testimony about the invasion. His guards brought him through the square as part of a transfer procedure. The Vreth saw Ruth across the open space. He recognized her immediately, not from images or reports, something older, something instinctive. He physically recoiled. His guards had to steady him. He asked them, his voice shaking, if that was the one, the mother. They confirmed it was. The Vreth shuddered. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. He said that his people thought they were the hunters. They did not understand what they were dealing with. They never understood. That night, Ruth tucked her children into bed. Amara asked for a story, the way she did every night now. Ruth told her about a brave girl who was never afraid. A girl who knew, deep in her heart, that her mother would always protect her. No matter what came, no matter how dark the night became, the girl could sleep peacefully because her mother was watching over her. Amara smiled and closed her eyes. Ruth sat in the darkness of her children's room, watching them breathe. She thought about the invasion, about the things she had done, about the Vreth she had killed with her hands. She felt no guilt, no regret. Given the same circumstances, she would do it all again without hesitation. Some things did not require claws or fangs to be terrifying. Some things did not need size or strength or numbers. Some monsters were made of something simpler. Some monsters were made of love. And the galaxy had learned, in blood and fire and the bodies of its slavers, that there was no more dangerous creature in the universe than a human mother protecting her young. The Vreth would never forget. None of them would.